Welcome to Future Learners, the show designed to empower students, parents, and educators. Join us as we explore the ever-evolving landscape of schooling, learning, and what it takes to succeed in today's world.
This episode is brought to you by Euka Future Learning, Australia's largest online, full-time education provider for pre-K through 12 students seeking a flexible, relevant, and meaningful education. Visit euka.edu.au today.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Future Learners. Today we are in for a absolute treat. My name is Brett Campbell. I'm the Chairman and CEO. I'm joined by my esteemed panelist and co-host, the founder and head of education, Ellen. How are you, Ellen?
Really great, Brett. Looking forward to today.
And today we are actually doing a first. This is a first for Future Learners. We are joined by another very special guest today. This special guest arrives by the name of Neena Tester. Neena, very excited to have you a part of the show today. The name Tester, there's a little bit to unpack here, but first of all, I'll say welcome to Future Learners, and we really look forward to having this conversation.
Thank you, and welcome, Brett.
So just to give a little bit of a preface, why I say the name Tester, Neena is an advocate and someone who has, I guess you would say, had many years of experience as it pertains to homeschooling. Neena has homeschooled her own daughters and children. And the name Tester, actually, why it rings a bell for us is we actually have at Euka, working with Euka, and two absolute superstars in the Euka team by the name of Tester. So Jessica and Megan, shout out to you girls who have actually gone through the Euka program and now work with us here at Euka. So this is a exciting conversation. So Neena, I want to start first of all, and I want to take us on a little bit of a journey here, because there'll be many families who will be listening to this and they could be on the fence and they're considering whether or not they should embark on homeschooling. And it's I think there's nothing more important than hearing it from someone who's experienced it and the ups and the downs and the trials and tribulations and all of those things that go along with it. Take us back to where was the moment for you when you're deciding to go, you know what, we're going to start to homeschool our children. This is the decision. Take us back to that.
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it was when we had our baby, my first child. I was never going to have children necessarily. I enjoyed working. I enjoyed the corporate world. But we knew at one stage, I guess, if you want adult people in your life, you've got to have babies. So that decision meant we had to have children. So having a baby was I never felt maternal. I thought I'd go straight back to work, but as soon as I had my baby, it was like, oh, well, that's over. I'll be, this baby, something happened in my brain, and that was it. And I had a friend that was homeschooling, and we just sort of vaguely thought straight away we'd be interested in that journey.
And who was that friend?
Back then, it was a friend. She was a pastor, but she was stepped back to mind her babies, to raise her children. Right. So she's still a friend in my life, and we did a lot with our children together.
Yeah. So,
yes.
So it sounds like you made the decision, I mean, immediately, right? You didn't even wait till you got to the schooling years. Was there anything specifically that was driving that decision?
That's a good question. I think there always starts to be one reason, and then it becomes a number of reasons. I believed it had to do with our faith. That was one thing. We thought, well, it's easier to raise our children with things we believe if we get to be part of that journey than feeling like school isn't going to support that. And then it became, I felt anxious at school when I was a teenager with regards to study and exams, and felt like a failure at a lot of moments, and knew I didn't want my children to have those sorts of experiences. And that it quickly it becomes a place that you start to see other reasons why. I really, for me, having I had girl babies. I mean, I had 3 and 1 boy. I shouldn't say I just had girls. And I knew the silly conversations. And I thought, I knew as a teen, lots of silly conversations and silly things that went on at school. I had bulimia at school because everybody's so worried about diet and things, and I just thought, homeschooling to me would be a better option with regards to children, hopefully not being as stressed about some of the things that go on.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for sharing. So let's sort of fast forward to the first days of homeschooling. If you obviously there's many years ago now, and maybe you could put into context a little bit of a timeline there, just so our listeners have a bit of understanding around.
Oh, what
yeah,
years?
Sorry, just to paint the picture a little bit. So, obviously when you had your first child, there was a decision that you'd already sort of pre-committed to, and then we fast forward to, the first days or that sort of, the first few months of homeschooling. What year are we talking there, circa?
Well, I guess very early 2000s, because I had my daughter in 1999, so 2005 or 4. I guess what you'd say about some of us back in the day, I didn't blended doing life and homeschooling. I didn't have a first date. I didn't try to say we're doing X, Y, and Z. We just continued on with what we were doing, reading, writing, material. And a lot of play, a lot of visiting friends, and we did have booklets. I remember ACE was kind of the thing around back then, but we didn't do well with ACE very quickly. So very quickly I chucked that and had to try other things, had to look at what other things were around.
So you took it upon yourself to, I guess, create the learning journey and the curriculum, etc., or the
Homeschooling has, there's been changes in the requirements and things like that of homeschooling since back in those days when you first started out?
I think we've seen massive change. I think back in those days, you were a bit of an outsider, and the discussion was, but I don't know if there was as much pressure with what we did in one sense, but in another sense, yeah, we were definitely outliers, and people, the talk about homeschoolers, everyone's going to be in plaits, and everyone's, dresses from top to, hem to the ground, whatever. That was kind of funny, because now nobody thinks like that about what people at home educating, which is kind of nice. But so there's been changes like that. Is that what you mean? Is that what you like, the pressure?
Where did you start to see the major shifts? Where obviously, like you said, you've been in this for the last 20 or so years, right? 20 years ago, this was the reality, and I was sharing with Ellen a few episodes ago that my first interaction with homeschooling was that of a religious family who lived down the road from me, and I was very naive to the concept itself. And didn't really understand it at all. And, I sit here today and I'm like, what a transformation of one industry. But it sort of coincides with the speed in which the world is starting to evolve, and, the inception of social media and all of these things have started to create so many, side effects, let's call it, to schooling. I seen it, Ellen sent an article over today to me that there was, in New South Wales, last year, up until November, there was 20,000 police call-outs to schools. I mean, that's insane. I mean, we might have had a handful of police turn up to our school, but again, didn't come from the greatest area, so that was probably just part and parcel. But it's quite shocking to see those type of stats. So you've seen it from the outside in. Has your children ever been involved in the schooling system at all, or have you only been 100% fully in the homeschooling world?
Yeah, we've only been 100% in the homeschooling world. It's always funny. The grass always looks greener. I think my eldest girl, at one stage, we used to drive past a school, so she wanted have a dress, have a uniform. So she made a uniform out of something and packed her lunches for a while until we all got over that, because everybody think, we had to be like the school kids. But no, they never actually went to school.
Is that Jessica?
No, that was actually my eldest. That was Sydney.
I was going to say, we're going to need photo proof, and we need to share that through our internal Slack channels of that uniform if it was you, Jessica.
Jessica did do funny things. Jessica was my one who got an American accent because she watched so many episodes of what's that? The Little House on the Prairie.
That's
and she used to wear her hair in plaits, and she'd put on long dresses to be like those girls. Yeah, but that wasn't my prince. That wasn't me as a homeschooler trying to make my girls wear dresses.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because this is part of it, right? There's as a parent, we believe that we hopefully are guided by what we want to do is right for our family and so forth. And you've also got to look at it from the child's perspective of going, they haven't actually experienced school, but there are a lot of kids who are at school. So there is that, what is on the other side of that fence? The grass is always greener, and taking that into account of, there is something about that communal feel where you see people all wear the same uniform, and you see that in sports teams because it creates, camaraderie, and it's like we're all wearing the same jersey and so on and so forth. But it's great to see that you can also still get that, but you can create your own uniform, right? Create your own uniform for your family. So,
yes.
So as you were evolving through the homeschooling journey, what were some of the I guess, bigger changes that you've seen along the way that sort of stand out for you?
Well, you keep asking me really hard questions. No, that's good. Definitely, well, when you say the bigger changes, okay, it did start to get more formal, but that irritated me. I remember initially they were quite happy with just sending in the answers and the tests we've done, and then suddenly they wanted us to do more things. They wanted us to come in. We were supposed to come in 10 days a year or something. Anyhow, that's what I ditched them. I was like, no, I'm not doing that.
That's actually just to provide context with that. That's the distance ed school, isn't it? Or are you talking about the American program? Oh, the distance ed school.
Yeah, and so initially they didn't make you come in, but now they do.
Yeah,
right? So
and
we had a lot going on because we were homeschoolers that like to be involved in lots of things. So it really didn't suit us to suddenly have this program. That before that it was quite simple. We just did booklets and sent in answers. But as I said, it didn't work for all my children anyhow. I had a daughter that didn't like maths, and very quickly that became too intense to try and stick to exactly what they had. So we're only doing bits and pieces. But other things.
I was just going to say, how would you say, when we were just talking about how, the kids would say, at school there's all these kids and everything. How did you manage the socialization part, which is always one of those big ones that parents say, but what about the kids? Are they going to be sitting at home looking out the window? And how did you manage that part for your kids?
We always think that's a funny question. My children would say we were in danger of socialising too much and not doing it much else, because I very easily like to be doing lots of activities, and I very quickly, if you get into any sort of homeschool group, you'll find about other activities that are happening. So we had ice skating booked fortnightly. We had a sport group for Fridays. They would often chat, one term we might do basketball, one term we might do softball. But and then we had what we called a Wednesday group, was just us three mums we all had 4 kids each. So, and that went for 20-something years, that group, I still see those mums, still talk to them. And the kids have gone to each other's 18th and 21st and weddings and things like that. So those are, So for me, the social thing was I've never seen that as a problem. And even where I live here, where I've moved to, I've got nieces that sort of look like they were going to homeschool, but they didn't end up doing it. But I did, to the tiny bit of homework I did, I could see there's plenty of things they could join, plenty of social groups, lots of activities.
What would you say, Neena, to a parent who's out there who's, they're currently experiencing, their own journey of their child's, getting to a point where they're about to make the decision, and I get asked this a lot myself. I've got a 3-year-old daughter, turns 3 in March, and I often get asked, "Are you going to homeschool her? Are you going to homeschool her?" what would you say to parents who are at that point where the decision is, whether it's the first years of school or they're looking to, maybe remove their child from the schooling system? What are some of the things that you would say to them to consider and think about?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I would say relax is probably the first thing. A lot of people get very worried about what they imagine their children must or mustn't be doing. For some reason, we all compare with somebody else. I was very happy not to try and run a race where I'm trying to compete with what I imagine everybody's supposed to do. So, yeah, you've known your child, you've been raising your child, you continue doing that, you know what I mean? And as we would say also, sometimes people make the decision as though it's this huge monumental decision. Just go a year at a time, just see how you go the first year, and the big thing would be enjoy your child, and just keep doing what works for both of you.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable one, and myself and Ellen have dedicated an entire episode to that, and you hit the nail on the head where you say just look, try it for a year. I mean, we'd go even one stage even further and just say, look, try it for a term. Like, you're not going to break your child if they are out of the schooling system for 3, 6, 9 months. However, I can also understand on the flip side, I remember when I was at school, the days I remember out of my early years of being at school was when my mum and stepdad come and took me out of school on a Wednesday to go to the rugby match. And I remember that like it was just yesterday. And I was so concerned about missing school though. So I had this own, as a child, I'd have been about 10. I was so concerned, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss out on school. And I think that's compounded by, whether it's society or it's familial, in the sense of the emphasis and the impact we put on something, right? Like it's hard to tell someone to relax because no one likes to be told to relax. But in the same token, it's like, maybe look at it very differently. Like, look at it through the lens of what's the worst that could really happen here. You find an alternate opportunity that actually changes their life for the better. Or you find out that it doesn't work and you look to amend and go down a different path. So I think that's some really, really good advice. What would you say to the parent though, who, because you sound like quite a proactive person, and from what I've heard about you and so forth, you're certainly someone who doesn't really need too many guardrails or rules to follow. You sort of build your own along the way, which is, I think, why it's been a successful outcome for you. What would you say to the parent who go, oh, it's all right for you. You have that in you to make that decision. For a lot of families, they do need to have, I guess, some guardrails to work with. And what would you say to that family or parent?
Yeah, sure. And as I said, often at the beginning of your homeschool journey, it's nice to have a program or something, such as, and by all means, if I'd had the programs then that are available now, like Euka, that could have been much easier, because it's they can pick and choose subjects and things but so by all means, that's a great way to start. But the idea is, again, not to panic. Just just because we say something should take a term or should take this time, if your child's not going okay with that, don't worry about it. Do you know what I mean? Like, try and give yourself. You'll find when you talk to other homeschoolers too, getting into the groups, I would say, is more important, because the other mums will quickly tell you what they are or aren't doing with their kids. They'll make you, if they're good, honest mums, and they were back in the day when we were doing that they've got their failures, they've got their successes. We're all happy to share those things, and that's a great help. So that would be probably, and also feeling confident that enjoying your child and knowing what's best for your child, you really are the person who's most in the world interested in your child. You must remind yourself of that whatever you think is going to happen at school. I think I read somewhere that the most that a teacher talks to your child ever is like 4 minutes in a term, to them one-on-one. Do you know what I mean? Whereas you as a parent, we know all day in homeschooling there's, you're interacting, you're chatting, so really whatever you think's happening at school, it's probably not. I think this is great imagination that, the teacher has lots and lots of time with your child. Maybe true for some children.
You said something there that I want to double tap on. You said, enjoy your child. unpack that. What do you mean by enjoy your child? Because I could tell you right now, like,
Oh,
so I think that, well, and I can only speak from my own perspective, and I won't speak for my wife, but I'd say I'm pretty accurate in what I'm about to say here, is that one of the concerns is I absolutely love my daughter to death, but I don't know if I can school and mum and everything and 24 hours a day with my child. I need a break. Like, I'd love to know some strategies on how you have been able to manage enjoying your child and then also making sure they're getting the educational journey that they want, and you're also not pulling your hair out just due to an obscene amount of potential extra stress. So how do you manage all of that?
right. No, that's it's such a big question. And of course, we all have memory that gets a bit foggy. But I did know if I get out and about in the mornings, because everybody's good then, I had 4 kids. So I'd be deliberate about, like, we might do a little bit of school, we might do a little bit of writing, but I wouldn't try to aim to too much. Getting out, seeing people, doing activities, like I had animals, things that would, then we're all active and we can happily come home. And I will be honest about, I did believe in breaks. I didn't mind that the children coming home and us going to our own areas, our own rooms for a couple of hours once we've done things together. I was very deliberate, and now you've got your own time. Boredom, I didn't mind. I read years ago, boredom's good for you, because that's when you're creative. And that we did have you've got to be flexible as a parent. I remember allowing my girls, we had a Polly Pockets room. They had dolls' houses that they were creating, and a whole village, and there was a road. So they could play in there with each other for quite a long time, things like that, or build things. But they did have to be, at certain times, just themselves, had to manage themselves, give us all a break, and then we'd regroup and go for the next round in the early afternoon, or going into the early evening. But I did, when I say enjoy your child, I knew different activities that we enjoyed together and that we'd do well. And I would try to make those a focus more than anything. I was never too worried about bookwork in the intense. I sort of read somewhere that intensity is for an older age, for young high schoolers or whatever. But the younger ages, lots of hands-on, lots of getting out and about. So that was kind of my journey. I definitely like getting out.
I think a couple of things I pick up from that is the concept of less is more, and it's not a matter of 9 o'clock, open your books, do some work, do your mathematics. It's like, and what kid really wants to do that anyway? I mean, I only ran to school so I could see my mates, or I could play. I'd get to school early so I could play touch football on the court before school. Like, that was my draw card to school, right? So kids love to play, absolutely love to play, and it sounds like that concept of, and this sort of feeds back into the just relax, take a little bit of pressure off yourself, and realize that your child is not necessarily going to be Einstein or needs to be Einstein, unless they are, of course, the next Einstein, then obviously prosper that forward. But the reality is...
And I did have a girlfriend who, they all like to sleep in. They didn't start anything till after 10 o'clock in the morning, and I used to laugh at that because half my day's gone by then. But that worked for them. None of them wanted to get up till... They weren't having coffee or breakfast till 9:30. So, you can work with what you have.
And that's exactly what it is, right? It's that flexibility to be able to work what works for your family. You might have a parent doing split shifts or working certain times of the day. It's like, because again, this comes back to this concept of, and I think this is one of the missing pieces for families in many cases, is that missing time. When you said you enjoy your child, like that, to me is something that resonates deeply, because it's not just enjoy your child in the schooling sense, but it's how much time and quality time do you actually get with your child. When my stepfather, he'd get up and he'd go to work at 5 a.m. in the morning and he'd get back at 6 p.m. at night, and in winter that was dark. Like, I remember on one hand how many times he'd be out the back kicking the football with me, and those were the precious moments that I kept clinging on to. And I think as parents, we live in such a fast-paced world that we forget to slow down and really enjoy those memorable moments with our children. And I mean, I spend as much time as I can right now sitting with Ayla and doing letters and numbers, and because of the joy I can see in her when she's learning things that she enjoys. And I think that's another part as well. Like, it sounds like you're quite flexible in the sense of, if my child doesn't enjoy it, how much of the, hey, you need to do this or keep pursuing this because they're saying no because it's hard for them, versus I really thoroughly do not enjoy this. How did you ever manage that through the process?
That's also another good question. I would try to find if there's another way, like when you say things are a must. For example, I sort of grew up thinking times tables, you must know them, because I had a teacher at school that insisted and I know adults that don't know them. So I found I had a tape that was a sing-song thing. So I just play that in the car and do it with them when I drove here and there. So it didn't become lecture or problem. Do you know what I mean? You just... Anytime, but we're driving half an hour here, half an hour there, we can just play this tape and that sort of thing. Try and think, how can I do these in a way that isn't as hard hitting as we have to sit at a desk and do it, but we can sing it. But you sing these little jingle and have a dance in the car.
That feeds back into what you said a little bit earlier around a lot of the learning seems like it was outdoors, it was hands-on activities, and this is something that we pride ourselves in, especially at Euka, in a sense of being able to create different ways of learning. I had a friend, they were over in Rome, and he sent me a message. He goes, history lesson. And it's like they're outside the Colosseum, and they're like, literally, this is what those holes in the Colosseum are for. And that's how you really retain and learn information versus textbook. So let's sort of fast forward a little bit through to, because it feels like a lot of obviously your feedback here will be welcomed in all years of homeschooling, but you said something about when it gets to more of a senior year where, learning is taken a little bit more, let's call it maybe seriously or intently, because again, as you're getting older, there's this perception that, what are you going to do after high school? Who are you going to become? So that essence of learning becomes probably a little bit more stronger. How did you, or what changes did you notice within your family unit from a homeschooling perspective as your family moved into the senior years?
That's good. They usually preempted if they wanted some more. I know one of my daughters didn't think she was a great reader, and so she pushed herself to read, extraordinarily hard novels and things, and she became a great reader. And then I did have another daughter who wanted to do more senior study, and that's when we found Euka, and she jumped into the Euka program, and that was great. She really preempted that. And at the beginning she was very, very anxious because she knew she hadn't done something so formal and so worked through, but she was very motivated. So that's sort of the journey that we've done with that, and she did that really well. She really, by the end of it, her confidence was so much better. But it was really tough for her initially, but she was motivated, so that made all the difference.
Where did the motivation come from? Because I can hear whispers in the clouds right now going, yeah, but it's okay for you. Your child's motivated. Where did you instill it? How did you instill motivation in your children, or in this?
Oh, gee, sorry, you're going to say something, Ellen?
I assume that you've got it in all of your children, but for this particular child, how did you? Because I think that's something that's such a skill to be able to teach your children to be able to be, intrinsically motivated and not need external forces to motivate you along. Where do you feel that came from?
I'm going to be honest and say I'm not 100% sure. I have a good work ethic. You are going to eventually join the workforce, and they all started working young, as in some sort of local job, and it was always going to be. So if you know that the work is your future, you probably will get motivated if you want to improve your situation. I think I have a funny story about my son. I have said this before. He was working at a local little part-time job. I think he was 16 or 17, and I knew they had a lot of work, but then he suddenly wasn't working as much, and I sort of knew his boss and said, what's happening? Have you got not as much work? And they actually said, oh no, your son said he's got enough money. So I went storming back home Right. Okay. You have not got it. You will now be mowing lawns from dawn till dark. You will be washing my house day. You have not got enough money. I don't know how. He's got this in his head. So he very quickly realised, no. That's working is what we do.
Yeah.
And if we're not working or studying or doing, you know what I mean. That's this is how we get older. So, and I don't apologise for that. It's been a good. I think there's just something healthy about that work ethic.
I'd love to ask you a little. I was just going to ask you about how you, when you had one of your kids decide, okay, we want to go and do senior study, and you said she was a bit anxious, how did you support her in that? What role did you play as a mum when she was embarking with Euka for grade 11?
Oh, that's a really good. That's a really nice question, because I enjoyed that. I sat with her. I said I would sort of try and know as much as possible how I could help her, which was study the same things and chat with her about how would she write out those essays. She did read some novels, which I made sure I read as well, so that again I could chat through with her and actually sit with her to do the first rounds. And really, I think I imagined. Again, it almost became disappointing for me. I imagined I'd be doing a lot more with her, but she, after a process of that for a few times, she was quite happy to keep going. Do you know what I mean? And I think but the story is that, again, she only had to read one series in the volume, and I read all 5, and I thought, gee, it's a lot of reading. I didn't know it was all 5 books, but it wasn't. It was only, but I enjoyed that too. It was good for me as well to go through that.
Did you find that you created a separation between mum and mentor, or did you find that was sort of a synergy that just went hand in hand, and you were both?
Yeah, I'd like to think that just is ongoing, because even now I think you sort of think you've drawn a line in the sand. They're all grown up. They're not being homeschooled anymore, but they still come with chatter and questions. So that learning is still ongoing, and that journey. So yeah, I think it would be a joined synergy.
Awesome. What else would you? So obviously you mentioned there that you stumbled across Euka when your children were moving into more senior years. What would you say some of the, I guess, fundamental differences are? And support that you got from Euka to help you and from what you were previously doing versus doing, embarking on?
Oh, that's good. No, easily that she knew that she could confide, because she hadn't done any sort of formal structural schooling, except for that we've done that little bit of ACE where you send it in. Having the teachers that she could occasionally send some information or have a query to was wonderful. Getting feedback, she did get her assignments and assessments, and having the ability to, because I knew with her first one she was highly anxious, that she had the offer that she could send it in prior to having it properly marked, so she could know if she was on the right track and get feedback so we could improve it, because she really needed to know that, because she wasn't that familiar. So that was I think we did that once or twice, and then we knew we were on the right track. So that was really helpful. That was
How did you find it from going? Yeah, you created your own curriculum per se, and I guess followed that through many years to then, obviously Euka, there is a structured, obviously with inbuilt flexibility, of course. But how did you personally find it as a homeschooling parent to no longer need to have to necessarily, create the curriculum?
Oh no, I was really happy, because I could see the program had topics that I hadn't seen. Again, my growing up years, I say I'm from the olden days, there were like 6 topics that you could choose at school, whereas she had all these wonderful topics. So that was, very interesting. And then again, she still had, even though it's Euka and it's structured, she still had flexibility. She could still do it in the times she
Yep.
needed. So because she was a great basketballer then, and she had work. She was working at Subway, so she was still going to her little jobs, doing her basketball, still doing Euka at the times that worked. And so no, that it really did fit in a beautiful way. I really enjoyed it, and I quite frankly, I was really enjoying her subjects. Yeah, they were great.
Amazing.
I've got a nice question for you. So, when you are thinking about homeschooling or you're thinking about anything, you always want to look at the end. What does it look like at the end? So your kids are now grown up. What would you say are the benefits that you can see in your adult children now from their experience of homeschooling? What would they say to you?
That's a great question. I really feel like they have landed a little bit more maturely than necessary. They seem to be quite confident young adults. They've all been working forever, and they're all very happy in their employments, and they just seem to be quite. They haven't had the pressures of school and things, and they don't seem to be that way inclined. I know they still. That's the other thing. We're not disjointed from the world. They still like doing the girls of all the important things, all the face and makeup and all that stuff. But they definitely don't seem to be kids that suffer anxiety about, how they front up with other people and things. And I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful for I have these young, confident adults that are almost a bit bossy. So.
And then look, I could definitely testify to that, especially from Jessica and Megan's perspective. That obviously the children I've met, not that they're bossy. That's not what I mean. I mean they seem like two.
They're bossy.
I could tell that as well. Don't worry about that. I'll just let you say that though.
I do think it's really
definitely
fun,
have their
though.
head screwed on. And
I think it's funny. Sorry, Brett. I was just going to say, I think it's funny, that whole going back to the socialization part that we would say, homeschoolers, do they get the socialization? But what you're saying is these are confident and mature young people who've been working for a long time. And I know from the experience we've had with employing Jessica and Megan, they're very motivated and self-driven, like you said. So would you contribute that motivation and self-driven, would you contribute that to the fact that they've had those opportunities with homeschooling to follow things that they're interested in and drive themselves forward?
Oh, yes. And especially, that's the other lovely thing about having kids at home. If kids have a certain interest, we can totally indulge that. There's no doubt that me and Megan especially, we enjoyed the animals. We had rabbits and chickens, and we raised baby lambs a few times, and training the pup. So all these things, and I guess it's all confidence building. I think riding pony. We just did lots of lovely things that and that confidence again. The main people in their life are each other. They're very much, my two girls are very good, very close to each other, and we were deliberate about that. We wanted and I can see that they're going to be friends for life. That was another. I think sometimes people think that the expectation is in families that sisters and things fall out with each other, but it's really nice that's been a happy place for them. But I would say the homeschooling years, to be quite frank, they were the best years of. I can't think of anything better to do than be at home and do this stuff with your kids.
Amazing. I've got two final questions that I'd like to ask you. Who's your favourite daughter out of Jessica and Megan? Don't answer that. Don't answer that because I know I know you got a favourite. I'm not trying to start a war in the family. No, the question I'd love for you to answer, and this really just comes back to I think something that can't be shared enough and impressed upon enough, because as you both know, I mean you've both homeschooled your children. I'm yet to, so I can only come from the outside in viewpoint here. But our children are the most important things on the planet to us, and their education, from my perspective, is the most important thing that you can instill within your child. And it's a big decision, right? It's a big decision for many families to homeschool or to take their child from one school to another, or decide to have their child have to stay back a year or jump forward a year, etc. So all these decisions are monumental and are arguably probably some of the biggest decisions you make as a parent. What advice would you have as some sort of parting wisdom that you could share with any families who are considering or maybe not even considering this, just listening on in to see an alternate perspective, what can you share as we sort of end and wrap up this episode?
I'm hoping I'm answering your question, but when you said like education's the most important thing, I'd just like to qualify that a little tiny bit with regards to, I think as mums and parents, character, we would say, is the top. And the lovely thing that about homeschooling is we get to be a part of that in a big way, and we get to protect. And I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to protect your children from, what they're going to. People think we're naive, that they are going to go out there in the big bad world. So it's lovely to have this time that we can say, you know what, we're going to create this space. We're creating something else. That we're doing this. There is an end date to it. They're going to interact anyhow. But it's really valuable and beautiful to know that I don't have to be anxious as a home educator about what's happening with my kid today, because they're with me and they get to do life with me. So I never ever ever had to feel that was. I think that's a great comfort for parents, especially if kids, whatever's happening. We know that schools are really trying to stop bullying and curb other things, but it's sort of impossible, I think.
And you actually picked up something really good there, because when I said education is one of the most important things, I just want to preface by saying what I mean by that is not your child's ability to pass maths and English and all of these things and become a rock star. It's more around how do we educate them on instilling their own and building personal values and preparing themselves for the big wide world. That's obviously just for anyone listening there, and that's not what I'm referring to, but very well said, Neena. No, it's amazing. So, Ellen, is there anything that you would like to add or ask to wrap us up here?
Oh, look, it was just one little thing that popped into my mind earlier when we were talking about, parents saying, oh my goodness, I'm going to be with them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is going to be hard work. When do I get a break? And certainly, Brett, coming from, when you've got a 3-year-old at home, that's a very valid because 3-year-olds and little people that age, they don't have an off switch, and it certainly can feel like they're on all the time. But the thing to remember is they get older, and very soon they really do enjoy doing things on their own. So I loved what you said before, Neena, about, even while they're little, instilling, okay, this is our quiet time, even if it's 5 minutes when they're little, to get used to at 1 o'clock, we'll have this quiet time. So as a parent, though, I've got to say, seeing the way that you interact with your adult children now, I can only say that that bond that you've been able to create, that you are the person to come to for wisdom rather than a peer that has very little insight into life. I can see that that's probably part of how your young adults now have grown into such confident people, because they've had that really good input. And unfortunately, when you are off in school, I know for myself, I was looking for my most important information about the most important things from people who really were great people to be giving me the information. So, so I think, I'm just grateful for the work you've done with your wonderful young adults, because we're loving having Megan and Jessica working with Euka now after studying with us. They're outstanding. So well done to you.
Thanks, Anna.
Yes, very, very, very well done, Neena. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today and being our first guest on the show. So congratulations and thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
I know how prestigious this is for you to be here, of course. But I'm sure you don't hear it enough. But on behalf of Jessica and Megan, thank you for being an amazing mother and having the values and morals to raise amazing children and people into this world. So you're an amazing mother.
Oh, thank you very much.